Ibrahim Chowdhury. He started his journalism journey as Ibrahim Chowdhury Khukon. In his early ages he wrote short stories and poems. At some point he has gotten further involved in journalism. He became a renowned reporter in Bangladesh. The Daily Ajker Kagoj was his first daily newspaper venture. In the early 90s, he immigrated to the USA but stayed connected with journalism. Since the beginning he was the U.S. correspondent of the Daily Prothom Alo. From overseas, Ibrahim Chowdhury regularly writes for the newspaper in Bangladesh. Among Bangladeshi readers, Ibrahim Chowdhury is a familiar name. When Prothom Alo expanded to the USA, he got the responsibility of being editor of this U.S. edition. The residential editor, Ibrahim Chowdhury of Prothom Alo North America, is a strong organizer and editor, and he became very familiar to overseas writers. Every week Diaspora writers write for Prothom Alo under his editing. Ibrahim Chowdhury is a familiar name as a creative writer and editor. Mubarak's Tale to George. Mubarak and George are my friends, they always hung out together. We loved to hang out with the rest of our longtime friends. George is the true American, he is neither Democrat nor Republican. George remembers the Korean War and how it cost him having no kids, but he remains excited when telling the stories of his life. Talking and arguing with him is pleasurable because he is such a free-spirited man. Mubarak is an immigrant from Egypt. He has been living life in America for the past 40 years, he's married to the country. Every so often he goes to visit Egypt. George thinks that Mubarak has a wife back in Egypt. Mubarak never gives a straightforward answer and avoids the topic. He just laughs and says, "I can marry up to 4 women." George quickly replies with, "Not in America, my friend." Two very different personalities, the longtime friends always tease each other or argue, but at the end, they always hug and smile. I've seen them like this for a long time. Mubarak came to hang out and said he went to the farm and sacrificed an animal. By doing this he rid his own animality. His bad deeds left with the slaughtering of the animal. George often does not get involved in religious conversations, which is normal for Americans. However, George still teases. George said, "I've been friends with you 20 years, and every year you go sacrifice an animal. I have yet to see a change in your character. The lies you said yesterday will still happen today and tomorrow." George often praises, he always says Mubarak is my good friend, but the only thing is he lies. George thinks Mubarak rarely ever tells the truth, except when he's in trouble he tells the truth. When Mubarak hears this, he snaps at George to get back at him. Mubarak says, "Those who see Donald Trump as a leader don't have to give me a certificate of truthfulness." Without stopping, Mubarak says, "By making an extreme liar president, we consider ourselves as proud Americans, but actually living in America now is shameful. Do you plan on leaving? You have a whole life in Egypt, maybe more than one wife." George jokes. After hearing this, Mubarak gets extremely mad. He angrily says, "This country is not only for you white people. This country was built by immigrants like us. Why did this talk of leaving come up anyway?" The American man in George doesn't go to argue further, he hugs Mubarak and says, "Forget all of this, tell me how your weekend was with family. America is great and will continue to be great." Mubarak stops and remains quiet. He takes a long sip of his drink and says, "Don't say any of that. I came here to talk to you about Saturday, but you kept saying all this nonsense and made me mad." George says, "I'm sorry, pal. Please tell me about your weekend. I am glad to hear all of it." Mubarak takes another sip of his drink and says, "My wife's been complaining that I am always busy with myself, and I don't give her any time. So I decided to use Saturday to give her time." George takes another and teases, "Don't try another kid at this age. You'll be happy with your wife and 1 daughter and son." Mubarak doesn't listen to his words and continues to say, "Saturday morning, I woke up and made myself a coffee. After walking around a bit, I laid down on the couch. My wife got up and out of bed a little after 9. She looked at me angrily. She asked if I wanted coffee. I let her know that I already made it, and I had a bagel twist for breakfast. My wife had her own breakfast, then she started talking to someone on the phone. After she takes her tablet and watches a cooking channel. After a while, She comes into the living room and yells, "Why are you laying on the couch?" She didn't wait for an answer, she just walked to the kitchen. Mubarak continues, I realized maybe laying on the couch isn't the right way to spend time with my family. So I sat up. After a while my wife comes and then yells, "Why are you just sitting there? Turn on the TV." But I didn't want to watch TV, my priority is to spend time with my family. With the TV and cable box, there were 4 different remotes on the table, and I didn't know which one to use to start the TV. So my wife grunted and turned on the TV for me. It begins to show Trump's plan to tighten immigration laws. Seeing this made me even more upset. The phone rings and my wife heads for the kitchen again. I am sitting in front of Trump now. Then my 20-year-old son stomps downstairs. He throws up the peace sign and says, "Hi Dad." Mubarak continues, I tell him I'm doing great as he leaves the house. I hear my old Mercedes making the starting noise, which means my son is going out. I ask my wife where he's going, and she responds with Starbucks. I keep listening to the sound of the car, until it completely fades away as he drives off. Trump was giving a speech, and mentioned that self-sufficient immigrants can stay in America. I tried to turn off the TV by taking one of the remotes, but instead switched TV to PlayStation. My wife angrily asks if I'm playing games now. I was thinking of how to respond. In this time my 17-year-old daughter came down. I say, "Come here, Ma." With a soft voice, she tells me she has an important show to watch. Mubarak continues, after sitting on the couch for a while I try to go to bed. My wife comes again and informs me she is cooking. I thought in honor of her husband being home she'd be cooking something special. I thought to myself that I haven't had homemade spicy chicken in a long time. After a long time, my wife came in when I was about to fall asleep. She informs me on how over the weekend there are plans, so she is cooking for next week now. She then proposes the idea of everyone going out to eat today. Mubarak continues, I respond quickly with the agreement, my son comes back, and my daughter's show ended. I kept to myself for a while, then say, which restaurant should we go to? My daughter says Italian while my son says Ethiopian. Then my wife says none of these types of random food, if we go we must get Lebanese food. No one asks what I want to eat. With the decision and the other 3, we get into the car. Once we are in the car, everyone respectively gets on their phones and puts their earbuds in. I begin driving towards downtown. Mubarak continues, I wished for ethnic food, I haven't had lamb kebabs in a long time. The car continues towards downtown, while everyone is on their phone with earbuds in. My wife is staring at her phone. Through the car mirrors, I try to look at my wife and kids' faces. I am trying to understand if we're listening to each other anymore. Nowadays, are we listening to each other closely? How do I give them the best day? Even Uber drivers can't drive like me, how do I engage everyone? George listens and keep quiet for a while. The 2 friends look at each other. George asks, so where did you end up having lunch? Mubarak responds with, a new fast food place in downtown. We couldn't even agree on where to eat, so American fast food was our best bet. That's how I spent my weekend with my family. Mubarak chuckles. George begins to laugh too. At some point their laughs begins to sound like cries. George orders one more drink, and puts his hand on Mubarak's shoulder, and begins to sing a song by the Beatles. All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they belong? Translated from Bengali by the author.